What's up, Guardians? Profane here. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got a truly epic Warlock build in store for y'all today. We're diving into an incredible in-game Strand build that's absolutely perfect. A build that will tear through Grandmasters, Lost Sectors, Raids, Dungeons, you name it. You'll be able to crush anything that opposes you, whether you're in a team or going at it solo. While this build features a few top-tier exotics, like the Ticcu's Divination, which has been extremely impressive when it's combined with Strand abilities, it's actually the synergy within the armor, the class tree, and our choice in all three of our weapons that make this Strand build excel like no other. Not only is this an incredibly fun build to use, getting to create devastating solar blasts that are followed up with a barrage of green crack demons, but truly, it is one of the most lethal Warlock builds in Destiny 2 right now. The centerpiece of this build is the Swarmer exotic boots. These were released with Lightfall and provide the intrinsic trait simply titled as Swarmers. Destroying a Tangle spawns a Threadling. Threadlings will now unravel targets that they damage. Enemies under the effects of unraveling will emit 3 seeking threads of Strand energy that will damage them and nearby enemies. This effect will last for 9 seconds, with any new threads causing the time to be extended. Each thread applies 40 points of base damage against targets, and when that gets extrapolated out over an extended time, that's a lot of additional damage that you'll be able to apply onto your enemies. With Tangles creating bonus Threadlings, you'll have a non-stop swarm of these little green rats, inflicting massive levels of pain against your enemies, who are already getting terrorized with ignitions and other solar effects. As I mentioned before, the Ticcu's Divination Solar Bow is also a focal point of this build. This is a game-changing exotic. It auto-targets enemies when hip-fired and fires off multiple tracking projectiles. Once these enemies have been marked, they're going to make some big-time explosions when they get struck by a causality arrow. Whether it's a boss or just a big group of ads, you'll leave them scorched beyond belief after just a few shots of this solar bow. Historically, the Necrotic Grip have been one of the most popular exotics to pair up with Strand, but the Swarmers certainly give it a run for its money, and in many ways, I find it to be a much more effective exotic. Since the Swarmers will be providing us with unraveling effects and additional Threadlings, we're going to be doubling down on the power and efficiency of these Threadlings and their regeneration. We start with Threadling Grenades. This grenade creates 3 Threadlings when it lands, with those Threadlings then having the ability to create a Tangle on final blows, which will then create more Threadlings, thanks to the Swarmers. Such beautiful harmony. Strand suspensions saw a significant nerf this season. They don't last nearly as long, which has made it pretty ineffective against champions, but we're still using the Wanderer aspect for a few different reasons. Suspensions are still very effective against rank and file enemies, or those enemies that come out of nowhere and just rush right up on you. And every time a Tangle gets destroyed, a suspending burst will be projected onto any enemy that's within 7 meters. The Wanderer also gives Threadlings the ability to create Tangles, which is something the Swarmers is already providing us. We're using Weaver's Call, which will generate 5 Threadlings whenever casting a Rift. These Threadlings will automatically perch to you unless enemies are nearby. Before you start wondering why we're not using Weave Walk, let me explain. Its benefits are marginal, at least in my opinion, and when active, they take you completely out of combat, which isn't always a good thing. There's also the slight dilemma of losing a 4th fragment slot when using Weave Walk, and that's something I'd rather not give up. Speaking of which, we are using the Thread of Evolution, which causes Threadlings to travel 30% faster, 30% further, and apply 33% more damage. Thread of Wisdom will create an Orb of Light when defeating suspended targets, which will grant us our 60% resistance bonus, thanks to Woven Mail, since we are also using Thread of Warding. Thread of Isolation is the final fragment that we're using. This causes targets to become severed when hit with consecutive precision shots. This decreases the damage output from those enemies by 40%, which will really come in benefit when taking on Grandmasters, raids, and other in-game content. When we put together the armor for this build, Our main focus is survivability and threadling regeneration. This puts resilience, discipline, and recovery as our main 3 stats to focus on. With my current setup, the armor ends up coming in a little short, with discipline and recovery still being below 100. But by using Font of Focus and Font of Restoration, we'll gain an extra 30 points to each of these while we have armor charges active, effectively bringing those stats up to 100. By using Helmet Siphon mods and the Reaper class item mod, we'll be able to generate additional orbs on top of what Thread of Wisdom will already be providing us. Since we're also using Stacks on Stacks, which provides an additional armor charge when collecting orbs, we should be able to maintain armor charges for as long as we're engaged in combat. Having continuous armor charges does give us the freedom of using weapon surge mods, but we are utilizing the benefits of Better Already instead, so we get instant health recovery triggered when collecting an orb, and we're also using Innervation, so that orb collection will also generate 10% grenade energy. To help our grenade regeneration even further, we're also using 2 impact induction mods on our gloves. This will grant us 25% grenade energy when hitting an enemy with a charged melee, which we have 3 of. This can only be triggered once every 7 seconds. We spoke already of the benefits that Ticcu's Divination provides with this strand build, but Ticcu's isn't always going to match with the modifiers that you may have, especially when it comes to champions. As alternative exotic options, I like to turn to the Sunshot, which has gotten so much better after the recent hand cannon buff. Polaris Lance is also a magnificent option, and with this season's artifact, both of these exotics will be able to handle different champions. Strand weapons will naturally bring us a ton of benefit with this build. I prefer to stick with those which provide Demolitionist so that we can get our grenade energy recharged faster, or those that come with hatchlings. Even though this build isn't designed around this season's artifact, there are a ton of great mods that are going to improve things exponentially. Let's take a look. With Elemental Munitions, we'll get increased heavy and special ammo drops. With Communal Pickups, we'll get bonus strand weapon damage. With Thanatonic Tangles, we'll have additional ways of creating tangles. With Elemental Fury, we'll deal bonus damage against stunned enemies. And with Rapid Fire Ranger, we'll have the ability to weaken enemies after consecutive precision shots. These enemies do have to be 45 meters away, but this will provide an additional 15% damage against these enemies when the debuff is active. While Strand is definitely still the new kid on the block, it continues to excel in every single way, and none more so than the Broodweaver Warlock, a true Threadlings master. And with that, we've come to an end of today's video on this exceptionally powerful end-game Strand build for Warlocks in Destiny 2 Lightfall. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this build and its exotics, and whether or not you've given them a try recently. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you as always for checking out the video. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated, and both really do help support the channel. And if you're a new Light Guardian, or just a battle-hardened veteran looking for a new home, be sure to check out the Discord link in the description below, and join one of the greatest communities in all of Destiny. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.